This episode, this situation is about multimodal mentorship. But a lot of what we're going to cover today is going to be in different realms. There's a lot of this is going to be pretty much networking. It's also about finding what you're looking for in several different places, and it depends on what you're looking for in a mentor. A lot of that stuff. So networking will be a major part of it. And it's interesting / kind of not planned but smart to do this after we did our last session, which was about pre-production and screenwriting.
It's all planned. The whole thing's planned. What are you talking
It's
about?
always planned. I'm sorry. It was preconceived. But the thing about what we talked about last time was everything you needed to do to get the most out of that, out of what you're doing for pre-production, what you're doing for the screenwriting part. Once you're done with that, once you've made the movie the first time, this is a pretty important step if you have no idea about certain aspects of production, certain aspects of distribution, certain aspects about pre-production. Even if you've completed your pre-production, some things are not going to be vetted properly, or some things are not going to help you or not be useful, or shot lists are not going to be, cohesive enough or comprehensive enough. And you could find that information through not just your peers, but also finding mentorship. And the thing about mentorship is there's nothing really new to it. Hero's Journey talks about it. It's in so many different movies. It's all about finding that wise older, your Yoda, your Obi-Wan, your, depending on what what part of the universe you're in. And, there are other styles of this story that have this idea of knowledge being passed down from one point to another.
And just to clarify, we've kind of been pairing these workshops as a practical lesson, but also a way of kind of going through the hero's journey. That has come out of the origin of this whole kind of workshop, which is the writer's block workshop series I did last year over on that Tuesday program. But this, of course, is made more relevant and I think kind of stretched out into hopefully not only the sort of nebulous concepts of the hero's journey for telling a story, but personalizing that journey, that story, that narrative arc into one that we can manufacture and manifest into our filmmaking hero's journey.
Yeah. The thing that makes so many universal truths so great is when you can apply them across different parallels of going from point A to point B. Road trips, journeys, hero stories, 3-act structure. There's so many different parts of storytelling and understanding how to make those stories that, the universality kind of crosses over. It's all about anything you want to do. There's somebody who's been in that position before. And whether it's not exactly, it's not precisely, there's other components that are different. There is this idea that whatever you've done, somebody else's experience, and even in art, it's about, somebody has loved somebody this much, somebody has been this sad, somebody has been this depressed, somebody has been this triumphant before. And, this is why it's good to try and find inspiration in art, but also to try and find mentorship wherever you possibly can. And I think that's what we're just trying to express here, and I think what I'm least excited about for this is the most of what I did as a filmmaker is try and find mentorship, because if somebody is guiding you through a situation, since they've been there before, most of the time they've had a mentor. The thing that is so, and I hate to start off this way, but in a lot of ways, this is exactly the truth, is that the film and creative world is extremely nepotistic. It's one of those things that is so sadly true, is the who you know is a really big part of how you make it in any of these situations. Who you're related to, sometimes works too. Like I'm related to somebody that's decently, is a name in some aspects. I never lean on it because of the idea that it's not it's not worth it to do such a thing because you're then beholden to that. One of the big famous examples is Nicolas Cage. His real last name, I forgot if his name is actually Nicholas, but I remember his real last name is Coppola. And he didn't want to get lumped into that whole idea. If you watch the Charlie Sheen documentary, there's a whole thing about how Charlie Sheen and Martin Sheen and then Emilio Estevez is their real family name. He wanted to be separate from this. So this is the thing about mentorship is it can be essential in a journey. It really depends a lot of where you want to be and what you want to be doing. But the thing about it is that mentorship could really kind of like come from anywhere. There's so many different aspects of mentorship that is so prevalent. They're just everywhere. The thing that I do more frequently these days, I think being, 40 plus, is the idea that I look at somebody else who's parallel to me, even somewhat a little bit older than me, and I look at where their journey is going. And if I really dig what they're doing, I try and model myself after whatever it is that they're doing. Not exactly, but it's like if they're, they applied for this, they got it. I was like, well, the next time that application comes around, I'm going for it. It's kind of this mentorship by proxy. There's people like, we had Ian Sharara on here. Like a lot of his journey sounded so much similar to things I had been experiencing or I had been part of, but where he was in his professional journey was a little further. And he made it far enough where he's still able to be part of that. I did project management, and I would also have enough time in between projects to be able to shoot a film with somebody whenever it needed to happen. So I'd be able to take 2 or 3 months sometimes off from work and just go and do, and that was where I was balancing everything. He's able to get into his creative journey and stay there as well as his business and financial journey. And that's something that, I have. He doesn't know it. If he listens, then just know that I appreciate what he's doing so much so that I'm like, yeah, that's where I want to be too. But, even before this, when I was a younger person in film, I was finding mentors every which way I possibly could. And there was a lot of the times, especially in my much younger years of studying to be an actor, like you almost take on mentors just as a necessity, just to find the information you want to find about how things work and, what things happen. And especially if you get close enough to somebody where you can start asking them really difficult questions. Like I had a mentor that was an acting coach I had very early on, that when I couldn't afford it anymore, my parents couldn't afford it, my mother couldn't afford it anymore. We just kind of kept in contact. And anytime I had like a really tough audition coming up, there's a character I'd never really done. Like I'd always ask, like, what do you think? Here's the posting. Sometimes he would also, I'd find him at the actual audition because some things were general enough where he would be able to audition too. And he was a working actor. He knew the deal. But that was kind of the cool thing. Like he would tell me how he would prepare for it. And sometimes if I saw him there, I already knew what he told me. So he's either lying to me and he did something totally better and he still didn't get the job, or he told me the truth and told me what I needed to do. And it helped me at least understand that situation better. And I think that's another part of mentorship is it could be somebody that you previously worked with in some way and just kept in contact with. And sometimes that information, even as sparse as it could be very essential to wherever your journey is. And it could be applied across. There's a lot of things like and I say this with AI a lot of these days, and we'll get into things about mentorship and AI, but I use AI for all the things that I'm weakest at. And it's usually time management and analytics. Like I can't do major analytics myself. I'm not very good at it. And I have no time management whatsoever with the way my life is. So those are the 2 things I use it for. But with mentorship, it was a lot different. It was like, what are the things I don't know how to achieve, or how do I get there? And there's the other part of this is like, don't try and apply yourself to somebody who's a little further than you. Not a little further, way further than you. And because it's the thing about understanding what mentorship is, it's the most accessible way for you to find the information you need to do what it is you need to do. Um, Most accessible could be working directly with somebody that's way further than you. But if they don't know they're mentoring you and that's not a conversation, just modeling yourself, like I said earlier, on somebody way further than you, it could be very tough. But this is also about projects too. Um, you know, this is the thing about mentorship is it could be somebody you worked with as a coach or as something like that, but it also could be somebody parallel to you, like who works on your set. One of the other mentors I had later that was more taught me how to produce because I was switched from being an actor. Um, they were a producer and they really liked the this documentary project I was in the middle of. I was taking interviews for, and like taught me about producing and contracts. And like that is a very oh man, so useful. Like so useful.
That's the funny thing too, because I think that we getting started, whatever it might be, right? Say music for me as a teenager, you take lessons or you start to kind of play out and you see working bands or people getting gigs and you're like, well, how did they manage this? And you ask them and they're older than you, they've been around, they've been able to create a network or create opportunities for themselves, but they might not really have great insight into how they manufactured that. Maybe they don't think about it, maybe they don't actually document or sort of organize and prioritize the process of manufacturing whatever level of success that they have. And that's an interesting thing too. I was really, really lucky with a band that I was in from high school and into college. We had some really great opportunities. And when I would come back from some of that stuff and talk to some of the folks that I learned from or looked up to, they would ask me how that came about. And it was because we had a guy who was managing us that was, plugging away at the networking and again, the manufacturing of opportunities. And like bands, as much as they might seem, one person or another is kind of pushing things along, you really do need to delegate stuff to be able to make it a well-oiled machine. And I think that filmmaking exhibits that a lot more distinctly because it is such a group process, at least typically. Let's not say, AI is always that way, AI filmmaking, but certainly traditional filmmaking resembles the process of operating like a band. If you're making records or if you're booking tours or, somebody's responsible for merch, or maybe there's particular people that in the band that are better dealing with like booking agents or, people that are hanging out and stuff like that. So you really got to think about like, you might want to do something, but somebody else is maybe a better fit for that. And I think that film exhibits those things, at least, from what I've seen. Again, I have very little traditional film and television experience. Certainly haven't like pushed it into any, I would say like formal channels beyond finding opportunity, for the projects that I was working on.
And this is what's kind of interesting about the new realm of where we are at, especially in regards to filmmaking. Because the system that existed definitely before, not just was a group project, it relied on the nepotism. Because the thing about being vetted, about about being pushed through the system in a way that people understood who you were and you had a reputation and all this other stuff, as difficult as it was when that was not on your side, which is why I'm where I'm at. It was one of those things that timings didn't fit. And the guy who I would say would have been a mentor if I had stayed on, but the guy who was really interested in keeping me on projects and getting me on gigs enough that I'd get my union card eventually was just like, it's just not right. Like, if you can't make this or you can't make this, if I can't always call on you, it's not something that's going to work out. And, where it pained me because it made me realize like I had to go completely independent and give up the idea of like being in this professional system. He was truthful. He was honest with me, because one of the things is his problem was also time. Like when it was come down to a lot of these projects that he was kind of given the go ahead to hire whatever labor he needed and just give him, he just had to give the names for the credits before everybody walked on set. It was one of those things like his thing was time. Like you had to be ready. You had to be there. You had to be, if he's going to call you, you had to be a yes. It was one of those things that playing around, maybe, saying flat out no, was eventually he's going to stop calling. And it was one of those things where he knew it was going to happen. He knew I was not going to be able to keep up the same cadence. And he tried to tell me, he tried to counsel me, he tried to mentor me through it. That it was like, you should really start thinking about this and start thinking about that. And I was like, no, man, it'll be fine. It's like, but parenthood is a very different life experience. And he knew that because he had been through it and he made it through it. And he just knew what was going to happen, just because not many people could really do both of these very extreme situations. It's not easy to be a parent and to also be on sets and doing that work. Like I respect everyone who's able to keep that cadence up, but it is very difficult. But mentors could also be the thing that guides you out of something that's not going to work out for you. Always go with your gut, always stay with your instincts. The thing I was being counseled about was like, the ideas of where I was going to be in the next couple of years might not be where I'm going to be at. And I ended up exactly where I said I wouldn't be, which is independent, just trying to work on projects, trying to get clients and stuff like that. And I did that for years as well. So while I wasn't pursuing one, I went for the other and then found other mentors along the way as well. Like, I'd say one of the mentors for this space, particularly Sundog, like he was the one that told me, like we were sitting on Twitter spaces with other people. And he was just like, we just got to do our own, or you got to do your own, is the way he said it. And, I said, well, co-host with me. And that's what we did. And he counseled me through a lot of the stuff of just like this space of how to navigate AI, Web3, and, how to deal with things and how to deal with people, where the money was, where the money wasn't. And it was one of the reasons why I always, his birthday, he passed away this point 2 years ago, but his birthday is New Year's Day. So it's one of those things I always appreciate him for on New Year's Day. And I thank him for it wherever his universe is at this point, as many of the wild things me and him talked about. But this helps get you through these situations, is finding these mentors along the way. And me and him just found each other just like being weirdos through, spaces, and just recommended one to the other. We started sharing work together. And I didn't know he was 20 years, 15 years my senior, but he was. And he went through things in South Africa that through his creativity that like definitely helped me figure out some things on my end. And, this is where trying to navigate this is very difficult, because that was something that happened organically. And a lot of these things should happen organically. But there's, the thing about mentorship is I don't judge anyone for any choice they make as far as who they choose to mentor them, because there's also paid mentorships. There's a lot of different ways that you can get seminars and consults and classes on all of this stuff, but this is the thing about how multimodalist can be, is you can't choose any of these solutions. But it's also about what you get out of them is the most important part of it. If you're not getting something out of it, whether you're paying or not paying, find another way, find another thing. find another way of getting that information that you want, and definitely find another way of, if you consider this person a mentor, like maybe downplay that relationship until you're sure about that. Because this is the thing about mentorship, multimodal, in every which way. It is a relationship, you know. So any of these ways you get it, whether you go to a trade show, a festival, you go to meetups, you're sitting on spaces, you through DMs, through DM groups, like whatever this is, it is a difficult thing it can be a difficult thing to navigate through. Just same as any relationship, they're they take all kinds of different shapes and sizes.
That's a thing too. You're going to need different mentors for different aspects of your creativity. What you derive on the creative side as people you look up to might not be the people you want to apply mentorship from in regards to business or administrative things. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and particularly because of how multifaceted filmmaking is, you are going to want to find people that have the experience that you want to emulate, but also the outcomes that you want to emulate as well. I think that everybody finds a way to kind of go downhill, make it easy for themselves to find progress, traction for themselves or their projects. But that looks different for everybody. And when you're making these very unique projects, or you're making something that isn't necessarily mainstream, then you're going to have to kind of cobble together maybe a Frankenstein approach to manufacturing success for that project, or progress for that project. And what applied for someone else because of the creative path that they were on, it might be great to pull that over, but it might not. So you have to, I think, be really flexible about observing different people's choices, but also be ready to remix their tactics into a strategy that's working for you. And that with film, man, it takes so long, right? Because they're long projects. If you're making shorter stuff, you can kind of iterate on that a little bit more. But this is something that I found over the last couple of years. It's really hard to make shorts that are able to be put into kind of traditional distribution, or things that find opportunity for you beyond maybe like the festival circuit. You really want to make longer or bigger projects that are able to open different doors or have a longer shelf life for themselves.
This is the thing about what Michael was just talking about, is and not everything relates, but so many things can. Like these days, in my eyes, it's stronger to tour your film in some way, shape, or form than try and get distribution for it outside of streaming. Like streaming, you should always be getting distribution for streaming, whatever you can get, however you can get it. But outside of streaming, it's one of those things like distribution should be toured. You have to do it very personable and very, has to be very driven by the fans themselves. And the thing that I always remember is I remember things about bands. I remember bands that did really well locally and how they would do it and where they would situate themselves. Like they would have offers to do shows in these places that do not have any fans of theirs. And, there's always the evangelizing and going out and getting more fans type of thing. But when it came down to a show like that versus a show where they know they have fans, they would always choose the fan one first. The point was is they would serve their fan base more than they would try and get new fans. And it kept that it was like a story that kept on going. There was sometimes they would try and do two shows in one night and they would have people come to both and it would always be wild, but they would very much make the show that has the fans the priority. And this is the thing about thinking about that band is like I remember the lead singer talking to me about this and how it would serve, how he'd always talked about serving the fans first, and he'd always have these like ridiculous stories about it, but it was always that idea, you know. And I think that there's aspects of many different modalities of doing business and doing creative work that match. So you can always find a way to make something work, but on the other hand, like figure out what that is for you, because that's absolutely right. Like you could have two people consult you about a certain aspect of creativity, and one will take a very business approach, one will take a very spiritual approach. Sometimes people take a moralistic approach. There are people I talk to about AI, and they have a very strong moral standing against it. And it's like, it comes to that conversation where that's not somebody I would ever ask about how to solve a problem because I use AI. However, other people I know who use AI and also are artists as well outside of it, I would ask them, because them knowing, both of those sides, it's like, yeah, well, you could do it this way, but if you're short on time, you should probably do it this way. And usually the short on time answer is AI generated or AI oriented. And this is the thing about having that consult, having that mentorship and navigating that mentorship, because once again, like, somebody I know who's really good at growing marijuana would not be somebody I would want to ask about how to grow on social media. Even though he does have a good social media following, it's mostly because he grows a significant amount of marijuana. It's not really by any magic he's doing. It's more about that this is what people like. He's very siloed in. So watching what he does, I could see it, but he doesn't know. I've already spoken to him about it. He doesn't have any idea of why people follow what he does. That's the thing. While we both are trying to get to the same outcome, more people finding out about what we do, the aspects of asking him how to do that, it's like, oh, just put everything, just do whatever. It doesn't exactly work properly, like, or it doesn't really work for everything. Like I'm about done with an edit on a short that's going to become a series, and like he would just tell me to post it whenever. But I talked to somebody who's probably a little more oriented to distribution and like how that usually times out, and they would tell me something very different about that. Maybe the ideal time, or the more ideal time to post it and get the more views around it, get the more understanding about it, and then keep people coming in for it, because that's what you do and that's your goal. My goal is also to just make movies, so there's that part of it too. But yeah, this is what the thing about navigating these relationships is that understanding what that person's possibility to help you or not help you, if you have a choice. But it's also the aspect of what that mentorship's limits are. Because somebody who's made it way further than you in an entire thing might have done it at a time where they can't really help you anymore and it's only anecdotal at best. But like somebody who is early in the Film3 space, Marty Kells, his name was, he was a major proponent to home video at Scholastic, and I think it was the late 80s. So by the time it got really big into the 90s, he was the one pushing it from that point. And what was great is anecdotally, like everything he was talking about is exactly what we go through in both AI and Web3. It's just lack of wants change to a different system, despite that system being in a lot of ways better in many situations, both AI and Web3. But then again, trying to like ask him like functionally how to do that was difficult. Like he didn't really know. He was interested in Web3. He put his money into NFTs, NFT projects, and stuff like that. But the nuts and bolts of how to do the same thing that he overcame to get VHS to be the mainstay of what made Scholastic a bigger business, not exactly the guidance you're going to be able to really get. Like, he could say what he thinks, but a lot of what we were getting from is more anecdotal. And that's sometimes more worth it than anything. But it could also not be. It depends on the kind of person you are and what you're trying to get out of this. But I think I think a bigger portion of this is also about what that person can give you about what you do. Because what you do, it may not be the guidance. The guidance you may need may not be about what you do. May be more about what to do with what you do. And that's another part of this whole thing, is that maybe you're very secure in your creative situation. Like I'm in a block fest of all these AI haters recently. Now that I block them, there seems to be more of them than ever. I don't know what happened. The bots are still everywhere, so I don't know what they're doing with the algo. But the thing about it is, like, I'm not trying to change their process. And I think that certain processes, this goes back to like getting feedback on those processes could be really useful.
Another thing to consider also is what not to do. You can learn a lot from the mistakes other people have made, or inverting their path to success or failure. I think that particularly when you have these folks that have maybe had success in a different era and it doesn't necessarily translate to today, like VHS sales. I mean, sure, we still have DVDs. Yes, that is still a physical stuff is still great to do. Certainly has been good for books for me. I don't necessarily think that my film stuff has the same physical purchase, right? I don't think that I have the capacity to drive interest in physicals for film, except maybe the Chicago 1893 documentary. But like, even that is particularly niche, and as much as I've thought about doing it, I don't think it's a good investment of my time or resources. So while those things have worked in the past, I think that maybe you have to not sit and stare at the bark of the tree, but get a little bit more of a bird's eye view on the forest, so that you can say, look, it's not so much about, am I going to make VHS or DVDs, but am I going to get this thing into distribution somehow? And is there some channel that is ideal for this project? Like, Scholastic is only looking to license and distribute certain materials. Some of these entities still exist out in the world, or maybe they have analogs in today's world for different streaming channels that are a great fit for what you're working on.
Exactly. And see, that's the thing. What was very useful about what Marty would talk about is like, where there's no way of using VHS as like an actual thought. But the thing about where Scholastic was positioning themselves in the home market, and how they were positioning themselves in the home market, and to whom they were positioning themselves, was really interesting. And then pivoting towards that was really interesting to see. And the other part of it was understanding that this company took too long to adapt. And this is why a lot of this was really early in my Film3 time. I think he was even earlier than I was. So this is 2021 when we're talking about this. And I was looking at AI in a way where I was just like, there's something here. I just don't know what it is. And it was one of those things where pivoting made more sense to me to start using those tools than it was to just try and still make movies and try and sell NFTs to make movies the old-fashioned way. And this is why that was actually really important, because of that. And that's what I meant. Like, there's a lot of what he was saying was just gobbledygook. But then when you look at it, and this is true for almost any advice you get. Michael is exactly right. Like, try and get a bird's eye view. Try and see what that person's experiences were and why, maybe when, because sometimes when matters. Even a week ago could matter for certain situations. And then always think about the why that person was trying to do it. If they were already employed, if it was just about trying to find the next thing for the next quarter. It was, very different than being a solo creator that's hustling their way through something. But this is what I mean about mentorship. Like, he didn't really know that I was taking this information in and translating it into my own analogy, into my own experience. But I was. And this is the thing about doing any of this stuff, is it could be by proxy that way. Where, I mean, there's people, I remember working in project management, that, the idea of not doing what somebody else did just because they did it, and to just not do it, not even knowing the outcome, just that they did it that way. And it was so prevalent to navigating the various ways and things we were trying to get done. And that could be very much how you feel too. It's one of those things, like, even having a mentor to know what not to do, is can be important. Sometimes you might not even be able to tell them that that's how they're mentoring you. Maybe it's best never to tell them that. But the thing about these ideas is also understanding when somebody does give you guidance about something, when someone's giving you any feedback about it, what it is that you're getting from it.
Did we lose you for a second?
No, I was holding for what I thought your open mic was, not trying to say the thing I'm not trying to say.
Oh, I actually wasn't unmiked. Yeah, but yeah, obviously agree on those points. There's, I think, a real value in being able to identify the people that have strengths that you're looking to emulate. This is a thing, and I don't want to necessarily go off too much on like the writing thing, but it sort of resembles what we call alpha and beta readers to a sense. Now, they're not mentors distinctly, though they can be. What I find when I'm kind of working through editorial, and you could use this for script too, I use it for, my fiction and nonfiction stuff, is that depending on the phase of development that the project is in, and also the genre, or I don't know, focus of it, the people that I invite to become alpha and beta readers for that work varies every single time. The people that are good for one project, I don't necessarily consider them to be good for all projects. I consider their interests and, their capacity to reflect on that and be insightful, and also their patience, because I'm very much an iterative sort of creative. I don't mind showing work that's really incomplete or unpolished early in the gestation phase, where it doesn't necessarily even resemble something that you get a kind of a whole look at. And you have to be able to find people to give you feedback on stuff that can see things that way too, whether they are writers or readers or filmmakers or musicians or whatever. If they can identify the little kernels of good stuff in there and can give you insight on how to make it great, then that's super valuable. If they aren't patient about the iterative process that I utilize, and can't necessarily kind of work within the boundaries of, the mechanisms that I employ, then that becomes tough too, because say for example, I use Dropbox paper. I probably should move over to Google. I just don't like Google as a company, so I try to avoid them as much as possible. But I also like the simplicity of what Dropbox paper offers in terms of formatting a document, but then also allowing for comments and threads of commenting and interacting between all of the participants on a document, to turn that into a side conversation about a sentence or a paragraph, or a question that I have, for the readers and stuff like that. Do that for film as well, where Chris knows the Exploring Our National Parks Volume 3 documentary getting very, very close to done. It will be done within probably the next week, I think. It's just, there's fewer and fewer things for me to nitpick about when I'm watching through or listening through. So, how many times have I done a compiled export of all that? I don't know, 7, 8 times. That's a lot for some people. Sometimes people will watch it once and they'll give you some thoughts on it. They're not going to necessarily watch it every single time. Or, you won't pull them in until it's more complete, because that they are going to get stuck on the sort of rough-hewn state of the work. So, I mean, in that particular example, it started as a series of shorts. Chris, I don't know if you saw it when it was that way. Did I show it to you when it was just like a bunch of individual shorts without the bookending stuff and kind of compiled together? I have no idea. I don't remember, because it's been like a year.
I didn't see it then.
Okay, so you only saw it once I started to toss everything together, but even then, it was still very rough. I would say, it probably is. It probably was perceivably more rough compiled than it would have been as individual pieces, and like that's similar to the music side of things, where again I'm doing this video. I'm also writing all the music, so I think there's 8 tracks right now, maybe 9. I don't remember exactly. But they've been developing along with that, even to the point where right before this space, we were looking at one of the songs and listening to the song, because I had worked on it yesterday, and then I had done an export of all that stuff and gone and listened to it with my cousin in a car to kind of hear the production in there, where I think, are people going to listen to it there? I don't know. But I've just found that to be a good environment to evaluate audio. And I do it on headphones. I do it on regular speakers, do it on crappy speakers and different vehicles, and also the TV. The TV, I think, is where it's going to be, hopefully, most perceived, most watched. So it needs to sound good through that system as well. And then there are different televisions, and are you using a sound bar? Are you using surround sound? Are you just watching through the television speakers? So you have to kind of test all this stuff. I don't know how much we do that in film, but it's certainly something from music background that we did all the time. And everybody, say if you're making a record, would go off and listen to it in their car or their stereos, and as you were working on it, because even if you're working with a producer and they've got a good setup there, that it is not it's not a reflection of how it's going to sound in all of the different types of systems. And that's an interesting thing with film. It's like, well, Where are you going to watch this thing? Are you going to watch it on your phone? Maybe. Are you going to watch it on your computer? Also, maybe. Are you going to watch it on a television? Again, there's a chance of that. Would you love to be able to screen it repeatedly in a legit theater on a large screen with a good sound system? Well, gosh, that is a really big ask. And I don't know how many of us have access to be able to do that in the developmental phase of a film. But if you do, do it.
For sure. Just a story about this. I did a couple of days on the set of Stay, which is a Ryan Gosling led film. Mark Forster is the director. At the time, I was working as crew to try and I was also an actor, so I was just trying to get on any sets I possibly could. I hadn't switched over to becoming more on the film side yet and wanting to create these stories. And I was trying to get as close as I could to Ryan Gosling because everybody was kind of chatting because once you're crew, you're kind of involved. And this wasn't a set where the days I was on the set, it was a very, very tight set. Also, there was a lot of people there that were not in the scene. So it was one of those things that I was trying to talk to Ryan Gosling because at the time I had watched a couple of things he had done. And I was like, oh, this is one of those people I really need to hear about, like what he's doing with his acting career. Dude didn't want to have anything to do with anybody speaking to him. Maybe it was the movie because he was supposed to be depressed all the time. He looked like a real emo bitch after takes. But who was really accessible was Mark Forster. And what is interesting about what you just said, Michael, is I was on crew. I was just like, and I had to manage a bunch of these people getting in and out of this space. As a PA, they just put you on random shit. And he was just asking about the shot, like what I thought about it. And so I was like, hey man, like, not for nothing, like, who are these people that are here? He's like, oh, I don't know about any of them except for one person. One of those people is my neighbor. I invited him to this set to tell me about the shot that I'm putting together, if it's just something he would want to watch. And he was so excited to be here for this thing. But he's like, but it's more important for me to know from people who are just going to watch this at home, that are going to see this, not necessarily in the theaters, what they think about it, if it's going to be impactful. It's one of the things that I always take with me as far as like understanding what that like feedback and guidance can be, is that sometimes like some of the best guidance you can get is from people who just do that thing, just are a part of that thing. And I think, what's crazy about it these days is, especially using AI, and even before AI, we were supposed to be this way, is how multimodal we have to be with every single aspect of our media. Like, I think it's kind of not surprising that Michael, being more of a writer and getting more into video and this and how to really make those stories shine that way, it's not surprising. Me wanting to do more print type media and trying to do that from more of a motion visual art background is another whole aspect of like why we need to have mentors in all these different aspects, not just the business wise, but even the creative and even some like also the technical. Because one of the things I talked about in the first like tweet I put out is mentorship could be, as far as multimodal, could be on a technical side as well. Like, I easily say that so many people in the AI Joe space, the chillin', AI Art and Chill. It used to be every Tuesday and Thursday, and like several people in there gave me such great guidance about using so many AI tools. And then as far as like mentorship, I'd easily say that somebody like Make It Rad was definitely a mentor of mine. Like, anytime I had a problem, I would ask him a question, and he would always tell me like, yeah, you need to read the GitHub, because I'm not telling you the answer. You need to understand this, that, and the others. Read the GitHub. And he would make it more of like, I still had to work to do. He wouldn't tell me the answer. It wouldn't be something simple like that. But this is the thing. These days, even if you don't use AI, there are so many tools enabling you to further your creativity or to have to utilize more of your creativity. because if you don't have the budget to pay for somebody to do your ads, your cover, your artwork, basically, your YouTube thumbnails, your credits, your opening credits scene, some of the inserts and stuff like that. Like, if you don't have anybody to do that, you have to be this multimodal storyteller and be that person that tells through all these different ways. And, like, even just an idea that Michael had given me on notes for my series, it was like, oh, I have to go make a radio broadcast and have to do that. It's like, I had to remember how to do that. I had to remember all the plugins and everything. And, it's one of those things that I learned it on the job. But honestly, if that were my first time doing this, I'd probably go and talk to somebody about it and get some guidance on it, because that's the thing. It's impossible to know everything, especially these days, and how we're expected to be multimodal storytellers. We're expected to be able to not just do one thing really well, but to do everything really well.
Yeah. I think I am not great at probably anything really well. I just am able to do some things enough to be bad, and hopefully when you put a bunch of bad stuff together for a first kind of preview, then you're able to kind of say, okay, well, all of this is terrible. These choices are just horrendous. So let me take a bunch of notes. That's why my process is the way that it is. Because you just duct taped all this junk together. So then you're saying, okay, well, how can I make this fit together a little bit better? Or, how can I utilize these other elements to kind of bolster up this that is happening, or this moment that's, you're kind of perceiving this little kind of gem in the rough of a moment. You think, okay, well, how can I lift that up with either visuals or audio editing, some combination of all of those things to make that moment a little bit more impactful. And that's the thing. It's really tough, I would say, to like hit the gas and just keep it to the floor the entire time through any project, an album, if it's an EP or a full length, an LP, you're looking at anywhere between, 10 to 50 minutes or longer of trying to hammer it out. I think that's why a lot of albums, you discover that there was one great hit, but then a lot of filler on there. I don't think they were looking to polish some of that stuff. They just needed to contractually fulfill their obligation, or fulfill their contractual obligation to do that stuff. Same thing with television shows where, gosh, it's hilarious too, because you look at some of the old production standards and demands where they're putting 20 plus episodes out a season. And now we get, gosh, what was Night of the Seven Kingdoms? I think there were 6 episodes of that. I mean, and they're good, right? But there's like quite a bit of filler in there too. I think they could have made one actual movie that was just, pedal to the floor the whole time, and it would have been a real banger film. I think they get more out of their marketing and promotion and social campaign by breaking it up into 6 episodes or whatever it was. But for me as a viewer, and I'm looking at it, it's like, this is a week is a long time to wait for another 30 minutes of this story, when so much of it is just kind of not critical. And I think that it's going to become even more evident how unimportant a lot of that stuff actually is as they go forward into the next season. Because I'm hearing that it kind of they're going to time skip um, ahead to another segment of the story that they have. So I don't know. When I look at even some of the phenomenon stuff that's come out, like Stranger Things, season 1 of that was mostly filler to me personally. First and last episodes worthwhile. Middle just a drag. And I think that like it is interesting to look at the way that they're serializing some of this storytelling and trying to demand our attention to watch all the way through, compared to these episodic productions of the past where you're looking at like this procedural thing that they're doing, and it is potentially more enjoyable in a sense as like these series of bottle episodes that every once in a while they drop a long arc nugget into there, and you can choose to follow along with sets of episodes or not. But like now you kind of can't even skip an episode because there is critical storytelling in all of them, but there's still like half of it is just like filler. These are tough choices to make. Creativity's tough, it is really hard. We have to be considerate of that kind of stuff.
And this is the other thing about mentorship, is that a lot of these big productions, they can't see the very thing that their audience wants in front of them. They just can't see it, because there's a team of people who are like trying to see something, and they're trying their best. A lot of these people are paid a lot of money to look at these markets and try and figure out how to span out. Showrunners, they're trying how to span out a narrative, a plot across a bunch of different episodes, how to keep it within budget and such like that. And it's such a massive production that what I think, if like I were counseling anybody now, and this is the thing about understanding that, is that if I were counseling anyone now, I would just give them what I see the audience wanting, and hopefully they take that into whatever big production they go on to, because obviously it's not happening. And I think there's no bigger tell than that for me than Wolverine versus Deadpool making a whole shitload of money, and then not even a year and a half later, they fire the entire concept staff, or most of the concept staff at Marvel. Disney fires, I think, 1,000 people. And the thing about why those two correlate for me is because the movie was trying to do as much fan lip service as it possibly could, and the concepting didn't make any sense because it's just what the comic books had. That's all they needed to give the audience that was there for that. And they did. There's many different iterations they did. And that entire movie is all fan lip service. And it didn't make any sense to have that many people concepting on something that you already have all the source material. You own it too. So it's not like you can't use any of it. You have to relicense some of it, maybe the Sony stuff, the Spider-Man and some of the other stuff. But the other thing is like that aspect of giving the fans what they want is something that you as a solo creator, or as somebody who is only doing a smaller production or even a medium-sized production, or in some of the people in this room, or one of the people in this room doing a larger size production, like taking that idea of understanding what your audience really wants and somebody being able to tell that to you is something that I think is really powerful. And that mentorship sometimes is the most painful part of it, is getting creative mentorship saying, you really need to be doing this way. You really need to stop redesigning all the Marvel costumes to look like, like chic leather daddy type shit. We need to go back to what it was. Sorry.
Side note, there's a really good program on showrunners, about showrunners on Tubi right now. I just watched it maybe, I don't know, in the last week at some point I ran it. I've been trying to do a rewatch of the Pirates of the Caribbean series. I started too late and then I fall asleep. So it took me like 3 days to get through the first movie. But yeah, definitely go check out that showrunners program. I don't remember the title off the top of my head, but it's there. Really good. It's a little bit older, maybe 10 years or so, maybe even a little bit older than that. So it kind of might feel a little bit dated because it wasn't full on streaming had kind of taken over, but it is worth watching. Just as they kind of go over some of the mechanics of production and show running and like the relationships, and as well, like how multifaceted production is, how you have to deal with the studios kind of dictating things, or you know, pressuring you because of budget and things like that. Hey, you know, they're a business. They have to do things that make sense to them. I think that we're kind of on the tail end of some of like what has been viable, and what people might have enough goodwill to tolerate in productions, whether that's like the formats of streaming or the shows that become successful on streaming, or as Chris was saying, like how much you diverge from what is canon in the source material and the reason why an audience developed around that in the first place. You know, is fan service good? Is it bad? You know, I don't know. I mean, if you're a business and you want people to come out, like imagine you're an ice cream shop and you only have like anchovy and like green bean flavored ice cream. I don't know, is vanilla and chocolate fan service in that, or is that just like the expectation of, you know, what you're going to get at an ice cream store? And like, I don't want to tell people not to make you know, a, a filet mignon flavored ice cream, but I think that you're very much limiting yourself to a niche subset of people that enjoy ice cream. So you might consider like a much smaller batch. You might have like a much smaller budget for that. You might have to charge a lot more to participate in the filet mignon ice cream. So these are, you know, things that you have to make choices about. And I think that some of these studios are recognizing that, sure, you can like hammer on ideological causes, but it might also require a different budget. It might also require a different price of admission on that side of things. You know, the balance sheet needs to make sense up at the top and at the bottom. So,
Yes. And I mean, there are other aspects to this too. This is the same thing about having, you know, listening to fans and trying to understand them. And then the idea of what you do with any of this counsel, you know, because if I were trying to tell M. Night Shyamalan anything, I would tell him do nothing of what anyone tells you. That's what you should do. Literally do whatever the fuck you want, because that's what your fans expect. They expect to do whatever the fuck you want, and it doesn't make any sense sometimes. It's absolutely out of the blue. It's crazy. It's not crazy. It's expected. In this case of Signs, it's probably the worst alien rendering we've ever seen out of any film ever. And this is even including the 1950s movies where, you know, we had literally puppets. It was way better than that. But on the other hand, it's something like Marvel, Star Wars, all of these major IPs. I'd be like, just do what your fans want. That's it. Whatever you hear them most loud about or whatever, just do that.
Just put Luke and Leia and Han on screen together one time in the first movie that you release with all of these characters in 30 years. Just do that.
You know, it should be really easy. But this is the thing about where we go with our creativity and how we adapt to these different spaces and these different things, and how we adapt even like what we make for these different things. It's like any of these aspects of trying to make this stuff, whether you're using, music or, a camera, or you're using AI, it's all about trying to understand the best way to give your audience what they want. And, there's people who can counsel you to get there from the outset and try and take your first best shot. There's a lot of my experience. It's better to try and take your shot and then see if somebody could help you on later. Like, be like, this didn't work. My natural instincts here were this, and this didn't work, and I don't know why. And that's the best time for somebody to come in and kind of explain to you like what their instincts tell them, and to diverge from where you were at, or to agree with you and explain that it's just the way it is sometimes, because that's a truth too. It's just the way it is sometimes is kind of a reality, and especially, and this is why I kind of hate on people who left Film3, is because right now is the time where all the problems we really had in the very beginning are solved, and this is the thing about where we're at with all of this. Even in AI, it's like anybody who has a problem and is like talking about how they don't want to use AI, I'm like, great. We already solved this problem with cameras. Like, you could already do all of this. We're at the best possible time for you to go off and do any of this stuff. And this is why, like, trying to express yourself with all these different methods, it should be just go forth and try it. But that's the other thing about it, is you have to have at least the understanding that if something doesn't work, you need to get some sort of change. And in mentorship, it could be a really, really dramatically beautiful change. It's one of those things that anytime somebody's given me a real like unlock to how things work, it stays with me forever. It's somebody told me about being a villain is being the the most liked but most hated person at a party. To being the somebody that everyone wants to hear from but no one wants to hang out with. And for whatever reason, that stuck with me too, because it was just like I played a villain that exact way. And it felt great. It got a great reaction from the audience. It was a live play, so it was a very different kind of like instant reaction type of shit. But anytime I've written a villain, I've written them that way, of being the most liked but most hated person at a party. And then I just build it off from there. Then I build off where they're from and everything like that. And it's one of those things that type of mentorship, especially as we do these different types of modalities, it's really important. And I mean, just being able to have somebody express to you how to take the best shot, how to generate the best shot, how to record the right sound. Because I remember we were doing demos in this like really shitty studio, and somebody was like, your drums are they're recorded from across the room. And like, how did you know that? It's like, because it's the way it sounds, and they taught us how to mic the drums properly, and not even from not just across the room, but also properly balance and mic them correctly. And even though we did it ourselves, it kind of half-assed it, like it did sound way better. And it was just somebody who had done it before who had just taught us that thing. And this is the truth about all this type of stuff.
This is funny. I'm in the middle of mixing these songs, and it's sort of interesting to look at what I need for runtime versus what I need for the I don't know, arc of the music in and of itself. There's some things where I'm kind of just repeating some stuff, and then there's other times where I'm going back and saying I need like 2 more minutes of music because I don't want to repeat this again. And kind of brute forcing the creative process to come up with new ideas, or kind of revisiting and remixing the existing ideas to stretch out runtime. And sometimes it's really interesting for me, to see how that comes out. And other times I'm like, gosh, I don't know that I love what's happening here, but also I'm not writing pop songs. I'm trying to create some soundtracks for this stuff. And it's really tough to serve two masters in that sense. Like, do I want to make songs that are listenable and enjoyable, or functionally aiding the visuals on screen? I think like when those recordings come out, there's going to be slightly different mixes for the album version than what is in the film, because there's just some places where I don't necessarily need to engage only a listener. I need to make sure that it's operationally viable for VO on top of the music, or not outrageously distracting from VO and the visual components that are occurring. And that's really tough, coming from like having been in bands and performing live and stuff, where it's like you want to try and make every second captivating, and focus on how you're orchestrating stuff and how you're moving through the segments of a song. Because I mean, even if you're in a metal band, or you're an acoustic band, or you're doing covers of pop tunes, it needs to hold a listener, and that's not necessarily what you're trying to do with soundtrack music. You're really trying to emboss all of these other creative components, these media elements, into some kind of higher level gestalt, I guess.
I'm actively doing this exact thing right now, because I've tried. The thing about spaces for me is I have a really tough time with dead air. It's why I don't go on many other ones, and I only try and host a few, because I don't know what is wrong with me, but there's something very wrong.
He gets uncomfortable with silences.
Yes. And it's funny, because my children are so loud that I love silence. Like, I literally sit in silence for hours a day. But for whatever reason, when it comes down to spaces, it's much harder.
It's fine. You're doing it. It's ripping. I feel like we've more or less hit everything we had mapped out. I don't know, Chris, do you feel that way, or are there additional things that you want to talk about there? Otherwise, folks that want to come up and talk on the topic, or add comments to things that were said earlier. Whitney, I know you were trying to come up earlier, so if you're interested, feel free. This is the time when we'll kind of transition into more of the traditional space, where make it a little bit more conversational, as opposed to trying to hammer out the stuff we prepared, because we record these for podcast release. And as it turns out, I completely spaced out on getting the upload done earlier this morning. I'm waiting on one platform to put this up here so that I can post and promote the podcast recording from last month. So as soon as it's up, I'm going to do the legitimate promo post stuff so that it is available. I mean, it's there on most stuff, but now it's kind of
It's a thing with stuff.
Yeah, it's just, waiting for all these databases to go through their processes. It is what it is. Dan, you came up. Welcome. Good to hear from you and see you. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it has been. I always kind of try to catch the Thursday film show. I like it when you guys do this space because there's not a lot of people really talking about sort of the film script, the film, well, just the film side, kind of wise. I wanted to bring it up because I've been restarting sort of the stuff I used to do about 10 years ago, which was a lot of events with startups in the tech scene, and sort of I do a startup pitch event. And what's really surprising about the startup pitch event is, and I'm really glad to see it, is we're starting to see a lot of media pitches. So we're seeing, like today, we had a guy pitch basically his film business. He's been doing, he's done 4 films so far, and he's got like a whole group of people, and they're trying to change a lot of the film industry in Columbus, Ohio, and how it sort of they compete with Atlanta. I guess Atlanta gets a lot of film production for one reason or another, and so their talk was a lot about trying to get Columbus to sort of be the next Atlanta for filmmaking and whatnot. And he had a whole pitch about how that could happen and so on. And then we had another pitch that was for a magazine. So in this case, the guy was pitching all about the opportunities to sort of bring a magazine back and why that makes sense now and all kinds of stuff. And then after that, we had another AI art pitch that was sort of same kind of thing. It was sort of art, AI art, but going into sort of like a digital magazine or whatnot. So it's just really kind of cool to see those pitches, and then they got really received well. So at the end of each pitch, like the magazine guy was looking for 150,000, but he got really well received. The film guy, he was looking for basically 80 grand, and he had like a bunch of people approach him on that, which was really cool on that. I just think it's cool to hear the space kind of grow and get more. Like, I just feel like that barrier is pushing down, and we're going to see more. I'm happy to see that kind of stuff. I myself, I pitched an event that I want to do called Trailer Weekend. Basically 48 hours. You basically had to, shoot not just a trailer, but you also had to shoot a couple scenes from the film or something like that. And do AI art, but the whole trailer can't be 100% trailer art. Like, it's got to be, I don't know, 60% shot and then 40% AI or something like that. So you actually have to go learn how to form a sentence in the film world too, and do the prompt stuff. So, anyways, just wanted to say thanks for the inspiration that's here every week, every Thursday, to talk about film stuff. I really appreciate it.
Columbus is awesome too. Very much underrated city.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I've shot through Columbus a handful of times, and have friends over there, and it's a capital city. I think a lot of it's Midwest. A lot of times that can be like kind of glossed over, but downtown, beautiful. A lot of interesting stuff happening there. It's good to hear that you're pushing on.
Thank you.
Well, one other thing I would say is the reason why. So this is actually something of counsel if you wanted to give it to this person if you ever see them again. The reason why Atlanta had gotten so much production, and this is actually coming to a head now, is they had a tax credit that you could borrow off of that you didn't have to prove more than that you just had the film greenlit by a production company. So what basically was happening was these films were getting these huge tax credits, didn't have to hire anybody in Atlanta, didn't have to hire anybody near Atlanta, didn't have to hire anything, didn't have to buy anything in Atlanta, and would basically get money to hire outside. And Atlanta was not getting the taxes, not getting the hiring, and nothing. And people destroyed that city's endeavor with that. And this is what I would counsel anybody who's in Like, if you see this guy again, if he really wants to do something like that in Columbus, I'd say get to whoever in their government and try and see what the tax credits could be for the area, because that's everybody that's in film right now, as far as big film, is just looking for places that do any kind of tax credits for making a production there, and that's where people are going. That's why Hollywood is getting emptied, is because the films are there's still stories being told. Theater going is still going well, but nobody wants to make any movies in California because the tax credits are shit. So that's what I would definitely tell that person, just because that's what made Atlanta what it was. But tell them to fucking make it better for Columbus.
Isn't there a second order? That's like a second order effect though, too, because Atlanta had like TBS and stuff out there. I feel like that was maybe they had some infrastructure, and that then led to enabling a greater expansion of the industry over there. And maybe some of that tax credit stuff comes up as a result of that. I don't know, but I do kind of feel like that what was it, like Turner Broadcasting, right? That they basically like CNN and all that stuff was kind of like headquartered there. Am I misremembering that, or is that correct? Yeah.
No, they had that for a while, but they wanted film production.
Oh, okay.
That's the big money.
Sure.
And a lot of these, for regular businesses in that area, those tax credits, I don't even think they really give them much.
Right.
But when it's film production, because you're talking, the production has to be north of, I think, either 70 million or 150 million. It was a big money production. No, and that's why you're like, how many Marvel movies they filmed in Atlanta? How many of these movies they filmed in Atlanta or near Atlanta, or basically in the greater Atlanta, Georgia area? Because they were doing these tax credits like crazy. But this is, business side of that.
But who else is over there operating? I think it was the guy that did all the Medea stuff. He's got like a pretty significant facility also, kind of, I think,
in Georgia. Yeah.
In Georgia, yeah, and near Atlanta. And like AMC, they were over there. I think Walking Dead was produced there. And I think used that guy's facility pretty extensively. A lot of interesting things happening.
They basically didn't get as much production as there was. They didn't see the return on it that if they had put the same stipulations that other places have for using their tax credit. See, that's the thing. That was what made them unique, is that they didn't require you to hire local. It might have been cheaper for you to hire local, but they didn't require you to. So you were able to go and borrow against it before you hired one person in the state to start utilizing the tax. You were able to utilize the tax credits as basically a loan mechanism. And that's where it got really wild. This is the thing about, like, in looking at these things, the producer I was talking about earlier, he always told me, look at wherever the taxes are, because that's honestly why you'll find out why things are made wherever they are, because it's fucking exactly how they do it.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah, bro. Sorry to do, like, that was the thing. I read about this recently, and I was like, I had heard about this, and it's nuts. But so this pitch situation, is it just to get funding, or, are you considering a mentorship thing involved in that at all, or no?
No, it's an event where there's no money that we can necessarily give the folks, but we do have investors that show up at the event. It's like a startup pitch event where people come in and they get 5 minutes to pitch. They get 5 minutes of feedback. It's kind of it's an event that helps founders get pitch practice. That's one thing. And then at the same time, they get feedback from investors and, people in the crowd, that kind of stuff. And it's just cool to see the range of pitches. We had the typical, AI, I'm building this thing, I'm going to take over the planet. All right, that's cool. Thanks for the pitch, and then we had these media pitches where the guy was, it was cool. He had done 4 films already, and he was sort of building this thing to support Columbus, and there's probably more to it and whatnot. And then the other guy had the magazine, and then there's another guy that's going to be coming up in May. That's another film one. So it's just kind of cool. Columbus does have a strong film scene. It's just good to see them kind of come out, but it's kind of selected. And I've tried to reach out to a couple of different people about talking about AI art. You need to get the door completely slammed in your face, or you get a handshake. It's kind of weird. It's weird. Still, I don't know if it's like I got shot down pretty hard, but that was in 23 when I first was talking about AI art. I just like joined an art channel. I was like, hey guys, and like beat up in the hallway, like never come back again, kind of thing. So the film people are a little bit different, but and this guy is definitely opening up because it's definitely AI art mixed in. I don't know. I didn't see like any shot film stuff, but we'll see. This is interesting.
Oh hell yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about AI, especially, but with film, I mean, film it's such a great medium because it has so many facets to it, and that's why like any of this mentorship stuff, it's more about like networking and everything to get all these different things covered because the creative, the business, the this, and that's why if you had a pitch fest that was just for films, you'd probably get another interesting group of people. And if you get investors already, a film is one of the worst investments ever, but it's great wash trading because that's how most films are made is basically through, I need to take a loss on something this year, and films are great for that because most of the time they don't make money. But when they do hit, they usually hit big. So it's one of those things where if somebody was really hoping for a loss and they just happen to find something really awesome. I think it was a director talking about how studios should lose money on films. And like, I got what he was saying because there have been many films that we probably all love that were enormous losses, actual, not just like Hollywood accounting, but actual losses for the production company that are so important to like film history, genres, all sorts of stuff. Like, but it's one of those things that loss trading was so important to so many people artistically, and this is the thing about Pitch Fest is like having that type of uh, acclaim to being part of a film sometimes is more than enough for somebody investing into it, which is why, anytime people felt bad about not being able to make ROI, it's like they got to be part of a film. They got to be part of something, a project, and sometimes you really find some great collaborators that way who will keep investing into films just because they like what you make, and they're, it's better than businesses because it does have an open and close date where things are just supposed to end. So it's a lot of the time there isn't an unamicable ending to the relationship. It's just like, oh, well, we went through festivals, we're on streaming, we're making whatever on streaming, dedicated. I'm paying you what I'm supposed to be paying you, and that's that. That's why. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like there's gonna be some M&A kind of merger acquisition kind of material coming on to the AI art scene for all the folks like the Rad guy, the folks that have been doing sort of the different portal sites for AI art. I think you're going to see, someone's going to swoop through there and sort of look at the available, not only the available technology that's available for acquisition, but who actually has, a certain amount of membership, not only from creators, but also access to, users or whatnot. You're going to see some collection there that will probably lead to like, you could like gobble up one or two of those. Next thing you know, you could have a pretty good 70% slice of the active AI art sort of scene, which is probably a lot different than the AI art scene. Like the active folks who are really keeping it going is probably a smaller number than the whole number of the AI art scene. At least for me, I feel like it's changed quite a lot. And a lot of that's reflected on like how much Runway and a lot of the other players have either sort of kind of stopped innovating in a little bit in ways and kind of waited or have just adopted other models. Like it hurts me a little bit like when you go into Runway and you're sort of used to always using Runway's product, and now it's like Seed Dance and Klinger kind of like here's these two models in here, and you're like, well, it's like, I don't know, it's like picking up a Canon camera and it's like, hey, Panasonic is here to do the aperture and everything else. You're like, well, I thought this thing was a Canon. Like, no, we use, someone else's core parts. You're like, is that what it is? I don't know. It's a kind of a weird scene on some of the art tools, but then I got to get back into it. I'm kind of, I don't know. I got into vibe coding and now that's like a whole nother drug, So, but I want to get back to the AI film stuff because I don't know. I feel like I lost my rhythm on it a little bit when I figure out how to get back on that bike.
I think they had to do that also, not only as a way of competing with platforms that were becoming model aggregators or function aggregators, but because who they are providing their service to are looking at being able to access all of that stuff or to be able to apply those tools readily. And if you have to go anywhere, then all of a sudden, you're starting to think about price, you're starting to think about convenience, and Runway as a platform, as a model producer, as a community, they're sort of, they have to triangulate between those things and make sure that they're staying competitive on all those fronts. And like, that's really tough. I don't want to like I don't want to say some, we need to like baby some corporation or whatever. But at the same time, you have to realize like there's a handful of platforms or model producers that have kind of fallen by the wayside over the last 3 years. And that can be a result of what they were offering, either from within their walled garden or what they weren't offering from outside of it. And certainly I think last year, I would say, was, at least in the first half of the year, was very much an explosion of platforms and aggregators becoming this buffet of choice. And certainly in the second half of the year, we saw the emergence of a lot of great models, and that's kind of like a twofold competition. So or a multi-sided competition for somebody like Runway, so yeah, I don't get upset about seeing that sort of stuff. My thing is like, I want more preservation of the wide range of tool sets and interfaces. I don't always want to jump into the chat. That's not my default, personally.
I will say the one thing that's definitely changed is, so with Detective Banana is this, I've been doing that exclusively since Runway dropped multi-shot, and then I'm going to probably do something with Seed Dance after I finish this run of this show. But it is the fastest I've ever been able to utilize Runway, was doing this multi-shot workflow and not really knowing what model I was using at any time, because they didn't express how multi-shot works. And then Seed Dance is in there separately. So I don't know if it's some sort of weird model switching they did where they were always using Seed Dance or whatever. But I will say the thing about how awesome it is to be on their platform is the ability to iterate and create faster, because it isn't just the video generation. It's like, I needed sound effects for Foley. I went into their sound effects app, did that. The image thing, it's really easy. It's tabbed, and that's the thing. They don't use their own apps and everything like that, but I mean, their own models. But every once in a while, if I need something without audio, I just switch over. I do also think, and this is the same thing I think about Google, is like, whatever they're not developed in now, that's not far away. Like Runway and Google are not going anywhere. And so them not doing something for, a year, 2 years really doesn't matter. As long as they give the ability to do it, you know, like one thing, like I would be a Google customer anyway, no matter what. Um, but they're now integrated into so many different platforms. Like I don't use producer AI anymore. Well, I use it, but I'm not subscribed to it anymore, only because it's also a Google subscription. But this is the thing. It's like Runway. I think they could have this buffet for 2 years. Wouldn't matter if when Gen 5 comes out, it could be something even better than what we have today. So
I am entering the the final phases of producing this nature documentary, I guess, national park documentary. I'm looking at the credits. It's nutty to think there's stuff going all the way back to like Gen 3 in there. There's shots from Luma in there. There's just some platforms that don't even exist that are in there, and mentioning that stuff in the credits. I want to be transparent in what's happening on screen. Some of those things are shots that I filmed, on an iPhone. All of the clips are generated off of my photography. It's really wild to look at how the models have evolved and improved over time. Sometimes you just have to be like, gosh, I gotta stop tweaking this stuff, and I just need to like get it done. But there's some clips that have been generated 2, 3, 4 times on different models and replaced as the models have gotten better, because I've been doing this thing for like effectively a year and a half. Now the filming and photography was in 4 years ago, was when I did it. When I took that trip, it takes a long time to work on these projects. That's, I guess, maybe the outcome of it. And it is wild to see how the tools have evolved, because what this would have been originally had I only used the assets available when I went on the trip, the spring of 2022. That was the same year that I started to get into generative AI tools. And I think it was late in the year, or maybe that summer, that I started to play around with Pika, or maybe it was later, Runway or something, or maybe it was Stable Diffusion that I started to mess around with late in that year. I can't remember. The stuff sort of blurs together, but it is a great time to be able to remix your existing work. Like the workflow used to get to this state of that project, I can go back to all the old assets I have from volume 1 and volume 2 and beef those out and basically do the same thing. I don't think I'll be able to make them have the same runtime that this has. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. But they are now viable projects because of the ways, the technology that's emerged. I think that's something I couldn't have predicted, when I first started doing that stuff. Gosh, I don't know, 2015, 2016, kind of documenting. And I was terrible at it too, admittedly. I didn't know I was going to make blogs or books or videos out of all that stuff. I just liked going to them. But I think that for people trying to explore, their creativity to be multimodal, maybe revisit a lot of the assets that you have sitting on your hard drive and see if you can turn them into something new or fresh. Because there's probably some kind of audience for this stuff. I shot a lot of pictures over the years, as I'm sure, most people have, but being able to revisit that stuff and turn it into something more evolved, and I don't mean in like a esoteric sense, I do mean in a technical sense. You never know what kind of opportunities or doors just making that is going to open. I do think that most of us probably have just a slew of stuff out there, and it's doing this particular project has definitely made me think about like, well, what else can I revisit? Even going back to like making music videos for songs with bands that I was in the past. Are there people that want to see that or listen to that stuff? I don't know. Maybe like maybe our friends and things might be interested in that, but you never really know. Music doesn't expire, it doesn't become extinct. You could create a music video for a song you wrote 20 years ago, and it's the first time they've heard it, it's fresh again. I've done that with the Christmas song a couple of times. Can't recommend that enough.
So actually, one of the big reasons why I'm doing this Detective Banana short series, mini series, is as a result of some mentorship that I did get not that long ago. There's a guy named Darius Britt. He's on YouTube. He is a great solo filmmaker. He's one of those people who can run his own sets, makes really, really cool stuff that's more drama driven, it's more performance driven. So it's one of those things that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's something that if you're into it, it's good. He's a great cinematographer. He's also really a great YouTube personality. He was doing this like free mentorship where he would have like 3 free meetings with you if you applied and you told him what you were about. And I went through and applied, and then after I applied, one of the best he agreed, and out of what we were talking about, it came to this point where I was talking about like I want to do AI, but it was all this thing about what I want to do and that I want to be back on set. And I have all these these things that I've written that I want to really make, but I'm trying to make these AI things beforehand. He's like, why not just make them with AI and then see what happens? Now, mind you, what's interesting for me is that he doesn't use any AI as far as I remember. I don't think he uses a sliver of it. He still does his own, storyboards. He still writes his own scripts, shoots his own films, and everything to that effect. And his thing was about like, you really want to make these things, and you really, your easiest point of entry is this. He's like, there's no other thing I would tell you that would just make this work for you than to just do it the way you're going to do it. And this was at a time, this was mid last year. So we weren't quite Seed Dance and, Cling 3 and everything like that in that realm. Gen 4.5, we were in still some earlier technology that was not perfect or even closer to perfect than we are today, because now generation is so stupid easy. But that was the big part of why I'm just going through old scripts, and I'm just like, what were these episodes that I planned out? How could I make this with AI? What will be difficult? What will be easy? And this is the thing about going back to that material is like, some of those things are really funny. Like this story that I'm putting out now with this, they caught this guy, and it's based on a story that I had known this drug dealer who he did his taxes and his accountant essentially got them to look at him as a potential drug trafficker, that he was caught for it. And luckily he made it out of the whole situation fine, didn't do any prison, but it was always a funny story that I always thought, like, man, that's a hell of an idea. Like, you get caught for doing the right thing. And it developed, we made this other story about a detective who was also a banana. And it's just kind of like always something that stuck with me. And if you have projects like that, and if you've always been hesitant about trying to make them with AI and always waiting for those times where there's going to be all the stars are aligned and that idea will actually be able to get made, just make it however you can, like right now, with the most minimal amount of risk that'll put you in any harm's way, which is, I think, the problem I still have with most anti-AI filmmakers, is that they're like, oh no, go make the film. It's like, how much does insurance cost? That $5,000 that you're telling people to spend, where is insurance in that? If something goes horribly wrong, what is the things that could possibly happen? You know, that's why just make the thing, you know, especially like Michael was saying, go into your old material, see if there's something there that now works better, you know, because I was just looking at something I made in After Effects with Illustrator years ago, 2016, 2017. And I was using the puppet tool, and, you know, I had somebody make a song for me, and, you know, I paid him, I bought him lunch, and it was like all these things. Like, even that is something that now would not take me as long to do, and I would feel probably just as proud of it, because I don't feel proud of that thing that I spent hours and hours making animation perfect for, you know, using After Effects. That's not easy to use, especially for this day and age. Did Therese just come up?
Yeah, Teresa's up here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I couldn't resist asking for coming up when I heard you talking about reusing your older material and transfer it to, and incorporate it with AI. And it made me also think of, with that track record you guys have, I just were curious how much you make the effort to make a record of the transition from different kinds of media that you transform, because I've been doing some studies in how do you handle your heritage, how do you handle the digital media heritage in archive and such. So I just wanted to check whether or not those thoughts are with you, because here in Sweden they are pressing a lot about the importance of how do you handle the archive, how do you write about it, and when you transfer to another medium. Yeah, I hope you get what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, kind of. I think for me, typically I turn it into a book. So I mean, I do document stuff, but it usually I'm very much like a use the whole buffalo kind of person. So if I'm making any type of notes, or I'm revisiting anything or whatever, that probably becomes some kind of something. I used to do a lot more tutorial stuff. Less now. I'm just more focused on making actual things than illustrating how to make things. That, you know, obviously the meta here is that we're talking about making things. So, you know, that's a different story. That's what this space is for. Chris, you have thoughts on this?
When I switched over to wanting to use AI to make films, or to want to use AI to make concept imagery for films, like, I went for one specific project that I had already written fucking 10 versions of already. And at the final version, I was like, I'm not going to write this again. I have a whole script. There's 196 pages of script, and it's only part one. I already have all the layout for part 2 and 3. You know, it was one of those things, like, that was what I was going for. And now, mind you, I had already shot test footage for years for this project. Years. I had shot so much fucking test footage. I have hard drives full of it was called NYZ. It was a zombie epic, and it was this whole thing that I really had developed from one end to the other. And I had made all of that stuff, and I put it all, I had all kept it together, that every time I had made this, I had seen how much easier it was to make it, and how much cheaper it was to make it. And now at this point with AI, like there are things that I had already made that I redid with AI, looks way better than what I made, obviously. And now I also have the source footage that I, anytime the performance didn't work out, I could just use that. And then there was all these other components that I had tried to make, I had priced out with people and how to make this monster. I had done some work with CG and tried to make it. AI and fucking one-shotted it. So it's one of those things, as I'm transferring mediums of trying to get all the concept things into AI, what I'm finding in the catalog is just how much cheaper it is to do and how much easier it is to egress into that. And so at this point, it's like now I have all of that source material to pull from and make other things with. And that's what's great about having all that is like Michael's making a book. Like I had already said, like, all right, I have this really bad CG image of this monster that I made. But if I take, if I do some photoshopping, I can make it look like it's part of a comic book. And that could be a thing in a comic book. And now I reuse that asset somewhere else. And it's a 3D asset. So there's a lot of other things I could do with it, AI wise and not. So like how I do it is I take all of that material and I reuse it. So I use stills. I use all kinds of like things from that in order to go forward with it. But that's the only project I'm really doing that with. This is,
But are you also documenting what you're sharing now, what your work process? Because I think that could be quite interesting to be able, if you will end up with have it finished, and if you will showcase it in some way, it could be interesting material, the process that you are describing for us, and very valuable for later.
Yeah, so something I talk about not too frequently is I have a Llama 2 model trained on me. And one of the things I kind of do frequently is I do these like chats I just have it transcribed. So whenever I do anything, I kind of do it as part of my chats, like kind of like journaling. And it adds, and anytime I do a training, sometimes I do a Sunday night training where I let the training run overnight. And sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it does. It depends on how much material I'm adding to it. So I catalog way too much about my life, more for a different reason for my kids when this AI is, when either I'm dying and I can't train it anymore or whatever happens, that they have as much of my brain downloaded into this, which I think I should probably update the model because it's Llama 2's limitations are showing. But the other thing is like all of this process with NYZ becoming Death Takers, all that stuff, I have not just the voice recordings from when I was doing this originally and then started adding it to AI, but now I have all the AI parts of it that have it integrated into what that was. So even if I die before making it, if literally somebody types NYZ into a chatbot, this thing will just start spitting out its fucking history, probably all the different aspects of it too. So yeah, I'm doing that, but in a kind of really crazy way, in my opinion.
It sounds wonderful. I love it.
Yeah. Good conversation. We are coming up on the hour as it is right now. So I'm going to do a little bit of wrap up for folks hanging out. If we don't know you and we want to know you, or you're an anonymous listener that we don't know you, we have a Discord server. It's free. It's open all day. It's up above in the nest. It's linked. So you can go up into the nest, swipe all the way to the right. That tweet has a link to our Discord server. You're invited. You don't have to be a stranger anymore. Also, Project Astral Phase 3 NFTs are out, available. I figure before too long, we're going to be talking more about that project as well. Relic the Element short story audiobook is out. Have been slamming on the podcast over the last couple of months this year. Bunch of stuff up there, including the recording of last month, which I will be promoting this afternoon. Look for that. Been doing a monthly release of the personal branding workbook and workshop video series on my Substack. That's up there. You might want to check that out if you're looking to kind of build out, your ecosystem of content. And then finally, a bunch of interviews as well on the podcast. If you're looking to learn about creatives, a lot of authors, but also there are people that cross over. I've got a really great interview coming out next month with a guy who is an author and, as it turns out, an AI filmmaker. That's everything up above. We'll be wrapping it up here.
Absolutely. So we, the Film3, want you to have a really kick-ass Thursday and have a great weekend. Find mentors where you can, when you can, form relationships with people, because a lot of what's great about any creativity, whether it's AI, it's filmmaking, it's writing, it's music, is finding other weirdos like ourselves who appreciate or want to work on these things as well. And sometimes those weirdos have done way more weirdo things than you have, and they can tell you how to be a better weirdo like all of us other weirdos that are also weirdos. So, the thing about multimodal mentorship, listen back to this, listen to the anecdotes, and just see where it fits for you, whether it fits or not, and how. Because we discussed, I think, the most multitude of ways you can do this. So much love to everyone. Thank you for everyone for showing up. Sorry about the technical difficulties, and have a beautiful day and a beautiful weekend.